and police taking away your right to defend yourself, what really is a Second Amendment right, to own a gun, which could be used as sort of a check on the government. This is where I think that there are a lot of people on the left and the right who have agreements on gun policy, because the Second Amendment was established as a check on any sort of tyrannical government. So what you see is, it's pretty funny, you have people who are center-right who are like, yes, we need guns to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government, but the American government is never tyrannical. And then you have people on the left saying the American government, like the center-left, is oftentimes tyrannical, and they have like a racist, militarized police, which is true, but you don't need your guns to defend yourself. And so this is where I begin to disagree, because I think a mandatory buyback system or a mandatory confiscation system, it's not even really buyback, it would lead to more violence in terms of police violence, which statistically I believe it's 33% of gun deaths are at the hands of police. So it would lead to more police violence because there's less of a check, and it just simply rings that sort of, it has that bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Yeah, and it really comes, I think that's, the gun culture in America is a thing that should not be discounted, because it's like there has been so many years of like guns in movies and Republican politicians saying the Democrats are here to take your guns away. And if someone comes out and says that, like I just don't think that even a lot of Democrats in the middle of the country could support it, because a lot of people in like city Democrats don't realize how much of gun culture is a big part of America. And I mean, I think that's just like we gotta start small, and not necessarily small per se. Because those impacts really can do a lot, but we can't go crazy. As I do agree with you, we can't go crazy and take such a big step so quickly. I really get the sense, and that is something. I think the first thing is the universal background checks. That just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it really is. Universal background checks, I mean, whenever they've been implemented in any other country, they've been shown to drastically reduce gun violence. It's really one of the key legislations that could reduce gun violence. But when you look at universal background checks, there's sort of a part which conservatives emphasize that I don't think gets talked enough about the left, and that's that we have a mental health crisis in this country. Conservatives, they don't focus enough on the guns, and guns are a part of it. But the left also, I don't think, focuses on the fact that we, as a country, don't guarantee mental health access as a human right. And that means that people are suffering, and people will lash out when they can't get the help they need. And I think you have to sort of have a two-pronged approach to this, which includes mental health care for all and sensible gun regulation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because it's like you got that's also could be kind of phrased that as a bipartisan compromise bill, something for everybody. So like, hey, we all kind of win there. And it's like, I think a lot of people on the left would be really not all that bothered about putting more money towards mental health. I mean, at least I hope and I assume. But the question is, when Democrats actually call the Republicans bluff on this matter, what will happen then? Like, I think that's another problem that we could hit down the road. But that kind of bill, a mental health universal background checks bill, I think that could really go a long way, because a lot of the most disturbing acts of gun violence that we see on a national scale, they're done with people who just don't have access to mental health. There's obviously the stigma of getting mental help, like therapy, psychological treatment, and whatever the case may be, because it's just the way our culture has unfortunately gone. So, yeah, I actually never thought about it that way. Let's say definitely an interesting way of putting that. Yeah, so speaking of a seemingly intractable problem, the Israel-Palestine conflict. That's been going on for a while, and there could be a peace deal. Oh, my God. President Trump is expected to host the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Netanyahu's political rival Benny Gantz at the White House on January 28th to unveil the president's, quote, deal of the century, peace deal for the Middle East. Though the full plan has not been released, the deal reportedly delivers nearly all of Israel's demands in exchange for the possibility of maybe someday, I think it's a big maybe, recognizing a Palestinian state. What are your expectations here for this deal in the future of Middle East peace?
I think it's very telling that not a single Palestinian voice was invited to the White House. The two people you have going to the White House are both high-ranking Israeli officials. They didn't even bother to consult with Palestinians. I think unless you get that Palestinian voice in, you're not going to have a fair peace deal. Because as you mentioned, this deal, what it does is continues Israeli settlements, which are considered a war crime. It continues Israeli bombings of hospitals, of energy plants. It continues the blockade of Gaza, which has led to a 90% unemployment rate. It's going to continue all of these vile actions that we've seen committed by a decidedly Zionist Israel. And only when you have a comprehensive peace process that includes both Palestinians and Israelis working together to have a peace deal that would benefit them and end all of these violent actions coming from both sides, would you be able to move to peace. And just having the Israelis there and giving them what they want is just some sort of ridiculous press sort of I mean, I'm blanking on the word here, but it's just it's a show deal, realistic.
Really. Yeah, I really do get the sense of what you're saying. It's kind of like it's a deal that's like no one's really gonna, like, the Palestinians were probably never expecting to get a good deal here. Like, I'm assuming it was something that's like, you know, like this is Donald Trump that we're dealing with, and his associates are incredibly Zionist. But still, it's like the whole thing of like Israel making this Zionist push, and it comes with the whole narrative that I think is worth debunking of Hamas, the dangerous, most powerful Palestine and Gaza and Hamas. If we just take 1 foot off their neck, which is the position that they're currently on, like they're like Gaza going to be uninhabitable starting this year, according to the UN. Like, I wonder if you could like talk about the kind of BS narrative that Gaza is ready to turn on and attack Israel the moment they're let any semblance of having a normal life.
I want to attack that from two angles. First of all, the fact of the matter is the majority of the rockets currently being fired at Israel are not from Palestine. They're from Lebanon. Hamas is deeply centered in Lebanon, and that's also due to Israel bombing and attacking Lebanon in multiple wars, and the last one, I believe, being in 2006. So the vast majority of the rockets aren't coming from Palestine. The Palestinian people as a whole are mostly peaceful, and the second angle I want to attack this from is the fact that Israel created the conditions for Hamas to thrive. They created that by, as I said earlier, blockading Gaza and constantly doing these interventions, which are just blatant war crimes where they kill multitudes of children. I believe in the last intervention, it was around in the civilian casualty rate, I believe it was about 50% of the civilian casualties were children. And then they wonder why they turn towards these sort of extremist groups. And so what you really do see is that oftentimes we hear these rhetorics, we hear these words that say the second we let off their throat, they're just going to turn around and attack us. But I mean, when you look at it historically, that's not necessarily true. I mean, we've sort of worked towards peace processes and accords within Palestine itself. When you had those Camp David Accords and the Oslo Accords initially, and they began to let off and they began to have a comprehensive move towards peace, there wasn't some sudden upwelling in violence. It actually went down. And I think that's what you would continue to see if you actually push towards that. And I think the narrative that we see is completely broken and pushed by the same Zionist regime, which benefits from killing these Palestinians and displacing them from their homes.
Yeah, it's really kind of an ever-expanding power there, Israel is, in the region. And it's a very, very disturbing thing. And I think people don't really fully get the sense of how bad it is and how really surrounded, kind of on all sides, Gaza especially is. They can't even leave by sea. They're blockaded if they ever try to escape to the Mediterranean. And it's one of the most densely populated Gaza is areas in the world. Whenever they'll try to go towards a border fence, like doing the right of return march that happened, I believe, in May in 2018, and many other massacres throughout the whatever time you want to pick. Like there has been snipers from the IDF kind of firing almost indiscriminately with the whole idea of the human shield, which is just like I feel like there's something not entirely accurate about that narrative, because all we see from that is just Israeli people saying it, never any actual concrete evidence provided. But that's a whole nother kind of element to it. But the idea is, I think the really most important thing to take away is like how bad it is, and how I really think Palestine would be, and Gaza especially, would just be grateful for the boot to be let off their neck, because they are really being slowly strangled, and it's something that so few people really fully understand, because there aren't many really truly pro-Palestinian voices out there in the media.
Yeah, and I think there's really one sentence that's really jumping out of my mind, and I mean, you've probably heard this before, but the term mowing the grass. This was a term coined by Israeli generals, and it refers to killing children before they grow old, because the belief was that when they grow old, they're going to be terrorists anyways, so why not mow the grass and get it done with before they become harmful?
I've not heard that. Wow.
I think that there is no better metaphor to sort of explain how brutal their attacks have been than the one they coined themselves.
Yeah. And I think it just speaks to the general belief and take by many Israeli citizens, and especially Israeli public officials, members of the IDF, and it's like the belief that these people are like subhuman, they need to be exterminated, like they're not people who are kind of treated kind of at the same plane almost, because you really get that sense with the idea of mowing the grass, like these people need to be cut off before they can have a chance to live a life, which is it's really some pretty insane rhetoric. For example, as you say, Naftali Bennett, a leader in Israel, implied that Israel, quote, most mow the lawn in Gaza, employing a common metaphor used. And the journalist, I don't know if you're familiar with Abby Martin, who's an incredible journalist, Russian bot, some people say, but she has done some amazing reporting about this. And the shirt that they have, that's I forget the exact wording of it, but it's like two lives in one shirt, like, and it refers to something that I'll try and find the exact wording of it, but it's like two hits in one, and it is a picture of a pregnant woman, a pregnant Palestinian woman,
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
In the crosshairs, and it's just like, how can you expect like them to not really like Israel when they view them and treat them in such a vile way?
Yeah, I mean,